Hi, listeners. It's Jana. Welcome to Grief Out Loud. Today we're hosting another episode from our guest podcast, Who Died?, which is written and produced by Aimee Craig. And in today's conversation, Aimee speaks with Brandi Maxell about her mom. Hope you enjoy their conversation, and please join us again next time for another episode of Grief Out Loud.
Anybody that knows my mom, this story is not surprising. It's the typical, when the kids are being really quiet, they're up to something.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking here to Brandi Maxell. We went to junior high and high school together in Maple Valley, Washington. She now lives in Omaha, Nebraska, hence the phone recording. And by the way, she says Omaha is really cool.
And so my mom was the oldest by a few years, but she was probably, I think in this story, 3 or 4, and so her middle sister was born by then, but I think a baby, and, my grandma was tending to the baby, and all of a sudden it's like, Kim's being pretty quiet. So she walks in to the kitchen. My mom's sitting on this little stool in front of it with her arms folded, and she had rearranged the entire pantry to how she saw it fit, and then was just waiting for my grandmother to come in. And when she did, my mom, I guess, stood up, put her hands on her hips, and says, "There, that is how it should be." And my grandma's like, okay, the worst part of it was not that she rearranged it. It was that it actually did make more sense how she arranged it. Like, how does a little kid know where you should put things in a pantry?
So that's kind of how she was as an adult, too? She just was...
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I always like to laugh that she was this bossy 5'4", Spitfire. But, yeah, she got it done.
This is the Who Died podcast, and I'm Aimee Craig. We talk about death, yes, but we also talk about life. How someone lived, what brought them joy, what they got away with as a teenager.
She, I think, was the little wild child. But being that she was the oldest, I think she probably hid it better than her younger sisters. And the stories that I have heard didn't come out until way later. And, it was kind of the typical Friday night, going out partying, coming in after curfew, maybe throw a beer bottle or two away secretively, that my grandfather ended up finding about, 10 years later when they sold the house. And, of course, tried to blame her sisters, and they were both like, no, that was your oldest child who could do no wrong. That was the party animal. So, she had a good time, but
So
it's
she
funny
was
because
hiding beer bottles? Where did they find them?
They found them in this little treed area, and they're like, she'd just pitch them out of her car. Oh, these are biodegradable. Like in business and stuff, she was so focused. Then I hear these little stories after the fact, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, what? She was a little wild child? What party animal? What are you doing? That's interesting.
When I knew Brandi's mom, Kim, she ran a restaurant in town. As a teenager, she just seemed very busy and important. The friends who worked for her loved her. Brandi and I never talked much until now about what she was like as a mom growing up.
Most of my childhood, early childhood, she was a single mom. Mm-hmm. So there's a couple different sort of first memories I have. And I think a lot of them are surrounding, she always had friends around. Mm-hmm. My mom had a really tight network, and as you know, was in the restaurant business most of the time as I was older, so she had somewhat different hours. But it seemed like we always had just this huge community of people around her. I can remember being a little kid, and now thinking as an adult, she was younger than I am now. I'd be thinking how so cool, you stay up with them, watching Living Color, and they'd send me to bed at 8. So I'd tromp down the hall, all mad, and I know they were out there giggling how did we become the adults here? So there was a lot of that. You know, she traveled often when I was younger with her girlfriends. And since she died, a lot of them have kind of come out and told all these crazy stories of them in Mexico and all the local young men chasing them with beer, trying to get their attention. Yeah, so I think they had a good time. And it's interesting that a lot of her friends, and really the tightest ones, were girls that, you know, she knew from junior high, high school on up. And they just stayed tight even till a year before she died. We're going on trips together, and we went to Tahoe.
I hadn't realized that her mom had been a Tahoma High School grad like us. But there are lots of things you don't know about a person's life if you don't ask.
Like, I don't think getting remarried was a huge priority to her. Like, it wasn't, at least it wasn't apparent. So I don't remember her really dating anybody else. I don't remember meeting anybody else or anything until she started dating John, who's my stepdad, and eventually marrying him. Like, I don't think it was something that she really had on her radar. And I must have been about 11 when they got married. And so that has been, you know, great, because it just being a mom and being hardworking, and so that was the priority. And, you know, when she found John, then that was like, okay, this fits. You're integrated into this too. And it was just seamless.
She got it done.
As always. She probably was just like, you're going to marry me, and that's what there is to it. She was very strict until, gosh, I was about, I think 16. And then it was almost like, okay, you know, I raised you to be an adult. You're going to make adult decisions now. And there were only a few instances that I was in late or something like that. Otherwise, it was most of the time, I don't know. You should be like, what? It's 11. We said you could stay out until midnight. I'm like, yeah, nothing going on. Just thought I'd come home. And it was almost like she's like, oh, it worked. Now, my mom wasn't a really touchy-feely, huggy, lovey, you know, oh, I believe in you, you can do it, kind of the Hallmark movie channel mom. You know, she was great, but that just wasn't her. And I think it's because she knew, even if she didn't know that she eventually was going to get cancer or any of that, that she wasn't going to be around forever. You know, she wasn't just raising a kid or a child, she was raising a citizen.
Brandi talked a lot about how Kim held herself as a professional. And she also talked a lot about just how kind and friendly and generous she was with the people she worked with.
Work hard and people hard would probably be her two mottos. Basically, anywhere she went, she made quick work of the folks that she's working with and spending the most time with. Kind of came her tribe and her family. And so she would do things like, okay, well, we're going to do an employee event. We're going to rent a limo. We're going to go to Chicago Fire soccer match for her employees. You know, so they were all over the top, loved her, best boss. Isn't it weird how, you know, there's almost like, and you were tight with your dad, so you get this, there's stuff as you go through life that you're like, man, I just need to make a decision. I need someone to tell me what to do, even if I'm not going to do that. Mm-hmm. You know, even if I'm going to say you're dumb and not listen to you. But, like, I just want to pick up the phone and rant about whatever the scenario is so she can be like, well, yeah, you should do X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. So I can be like, I'm not going to do that, and then eventually do it. But there's just, like, those little things that's so weird about it. And you don't realize it until one of your parents dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I mean, I always think about how I always felt like my dad knew me better than anyone else.
Yep.
You know, and there's no one, I mean, you can have great friends and partners and whatever, but nobody knows you since you were born, you know.
Exactly. exactly.
In the same way that your parents.
Yeah, your parents watch you create your decision process.
Mm-hmm. How did you hear about her diagnosis?
So that is an interesting sort of tale. They had moved to Chicago, my mom and John, because my mom got a promotion. And it was maybe the next year. It was the next year that we were out there for Thanksgiving. And we got back on, I think we got back on Sunday. So I'm going to work on Monday, and at that point I was, taking the ferry into Seattle, and I'm sitting on the ferry, and John calls. Oh, that's really weird. I just left there. What are you calling about? And I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm driving to the airport to pick up your grandmother. And I'm like, no, she was just on a plane with me last night when we got back. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to pick her up now. She's coming back. I could tell he was upset. And he said, yeah, your mom has cancer. And nobody was going to tell you, but if something happens, I don't want you to be mad at me. And it was at that time, she was diagnosed 3B, but it was cervical cancer. So generally I'll tell people, she died of stubbornness. And that's why you should always get pap smears. Make sure you're doing your annual checkups, because that's, in her instance, maybe something that could have been prevented.
So she hadn't planned to tell you.
Yeah, I don't know what her whole plan, if she had thought that one through at all. But I know that he said nobody was going to tell you, but I wanted you to know. And then later it came out that that's why. If something happened, he didn't want me to be mad at him.
Wow. So what was your next conversation with your mom like after that?
It was normal. I gave her, I'm very interested in kind of health and all these things. I'm like, what are you doing not telling me? And I think it's simply because she just didn't know, how do you have that conversation? I think there's a lot of things in life, and especially in parenting, where there's no rule book. And being as far away as she was, she'd only ever lived in Washington, moved to Chicago at 40. Now what? Now what do we do?
When do you think she knew she was going to die?
Probably October. And she called and said, you just gotta come visit. And she was kind of being funny, but kind of serious, I guess, or more serious than I thought she was. I don't know if we can get out there. She ended up, I guess, calling my boyfriend and saying, hey, you guys have to come out here. Brandi says she can't because of work. You got to convince her to come out here. Like, that's aggressive. But I think it's because she knew the days were sort of numbered at that point. And we had a great visit with them. And then in that Christmas, she ended up basically being in the hospital kind of all of a lot of December and then all through Christmas and a bit in January. And then I went out again in January, and at that point she was on hospice in a lot of pain, so they were doing a lot to keep her comfortable. I think I left about 3 days before she died. There was talk about staying, and I knowing my mom, she'd hung on forever. I think if she knew I was there, she probably would have hung on longer. So when I left, I was like, it's okay. You can go. And she knew that I was kind of going. And I think as private and as brave and all these things as she was throughout her life, that was, one of the things that she needed me to not be there or see that.
She needed to know that you were out doing your thing. And
yeah, that she prepared me, and I was good.
There were 2 memorial services for Kim, one in her new home of Chicago and one in her hometown of Maple Valley.
When we had the one in Maple Valley, it was packed. I'm willing to bet there were, probably close to 300 people there. I don't know. There were a ton of people there. And it was an all-day affair. I mean, we ended up going from there to another friend's bar, and it was kind of the crew from my mom's high school, all her tight friends, their spouses, some of their kids. And it was a full day of just celebrating, which is what she would have wanted. She didn't want the church thing and the pastor, and she wanted get up, tell funny stories, eat good food, have a great time, laugh a lot. And that's exactly what it was.
Will you say her name, birthday, and death date for me?
Kim Marie Unsterford Northam. Birthday, November 18th, 1963. And died February 2nd, 2009. Groundhog Day. And also, as I grew up in a huge Seahawks family, right? We loved the Seahawks when the Seahawks were bad. My parents had season tickets in the Kingdome, and then when they moved to Husky Stadium, huge Seahawks family. In 2013-14 season, I said, actually it was 2014-15 season, I said, the Super Bowl is February 2nd. Seahawks are going to win the Super Bowl. And I said this in August before the season even started. And lo and behold, that year is when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl on February 2nd. Yeah, they won on the anniversary of her death. It was unbelievable. I don't really consider myself to be a huge believer in kind of outside stuff, but yeah, there's something to that.
Yeah, at the very least, it feels good to you.
Exactly.
If you'd like to tell a friend about this podcast, I'd appreciate it. You can tell them that, of course, death can be sad, and grief can be super lonely, but there's also beauty and joy and connection in all of it. I feel like part of our goal with this podcast is we say yes to sadness and yes to everything else that goes along with it.
There's something about, I don't want to call it like the club, but like when you get it, like It sucks. It sucks that you get it. It sucks to go through that. But there's almost there's just an unspoken connection at that point.
Well, I'm sorry that we're co-club members.
I know, but that's okay. I mean, you're good company.
This was the Who Died podcast. I'm Aimee. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.